What's going on, everyone? Thanks for entering the Lobby of Hobbies. I'm back with another Kickstarter preview, this time from a designer that you might know called John D. Clair, who has put out games like Mystic Vale, Space Base, and one that received a lot of buzz last year, a little push your luck rolling dice racing game called Cubitos. Now, if you like that element of rolling dice, you're going to be rolling not dice in this game, you're actually going to be rolling meeples. This one is Rolling Heights from AEG. Now, this is all about city planning, building up your city, trying to be the best general contractor. So if all that sounds like it might be up your alley, without further ado, let's get into it. Now, in Rolling Heights, players are going to be tasked with the idea of being general contractors, trying to build building plans, purchase those plans, place them out into various building plots onto the land. They're going to be hiring workers that are going to allow them to gather resources to build buildings to fulfill these building plan objectives. Whoever scores the most points at the end of the game is going to be determined the winner. Now let's talk about how this game is set up and played. Now to set up, players are going to take the point track and place it in the center of the table. This point track is going to not only keep track of points, but also let players keep an eye out on what each type of worker does, whether it be specific resources that they grant players or specific abilities that they give them. There's also a commodity trading chart that players are going to be able to trade resources for to gain other resources for workers they may not have. And also, players will be dealing out 3 public objectives that are going to be used and scored at the end of the game for all players. After this, players are going to set up the land plot area by placing out 6 tiles in a 2x3 grid, and this is going to be randomly placed dependent on the number of players. After this, players are going to create and make a level 1 market area for buildings, and each building is going to have a different cost dependent on how it is dealt out. They are also going to do the same on the opposite side of the board, creating a level 2 building market. And again, these buildings are just a little bit more powerful, grant sometimes a little different types of abilities, different types of meeples, and higher point values. They also cost more as well. Once this is set up, players will draft one level 1 building and place it out onto the land plots on the board. If the building type that they place matches the land plot icon, they are going to score the indicated points that are on the board for that. Players will also receive a worksite box that they're going to be able to roll their meeples into, along with 2 construction workers and 2 carpenters to start the game. They'll receive some ownership tokens and 1 player token that's going to keep track of their score on the point track. Play is broken up into 4 different phases, with the first 2 phases being done simultaneously by players. Now the prep phase, is where players are going to be taking their meeples and rolling them into their worksite box. They can roll up to 10 of their meeples, and any that land on their feet or on their side are considered in working status. Those working status meeples are going to be removed from the box, and players can continuously roll any exhausted workers. Now, once the player has removed at least half of their meeples to a working status, they can choose to go into step 2 or phase 2, which is called the risk phase. At this time, they can roll any of their exhausted workers, but if they choose to, at least one of those workers has to land into a working status. If not, workers will go on strike, and when they do, those exhausted workers are going to take half of the working status workers with them to the picket lines. Now, after all players have gone through their prep and risk phase, play will move on to phase 3, which is the main phase. During this time, players are going to go in player turn order and start activating their meeples. They're going to gather resources, they're going to activate abilities for the various meeples, and they can choose to purchase building plans. When they do, they're going to pay their costs, place them out onto their board, playing any placement costs that are required, and then they can use their resources to start building on any of their owned building plans. Once a building plan is completed, players are going to gain victory points as well as various abilities, sometimes new workers that they're hiring into their workforce. Players during this time can also trade commodities, meaning that they can trade resources dependent on the chart on that point tracker and trade them for resources that they do not have. During the fourth and final phase, the cleanup phase, players are going to lose any spending power or resources that they have gathered. They are also going to take their workers, both active and inactive, and place them and get them ready for the next turn. They're also going to refill the building market that they purchased from. If they chose not to purchase one of the first two buildings, which are the cheapest buildings, those buildings are going to become more enticing by players and they are going to receive a wild token on them. Play will continue to the next player until all players have completed their main phase and cleanup phase. Then they will push on into the next round, starting with that prep and risk phase, and continuously do this until the end game is triggered. The end game is triggered once one resource is completely depleted and it is fully on their board being used in buildings. Now, players will take one final turn and they will proceed to end game scoring. Players are going to calculate their scores based on the buildings that they have constructed throughout the game, and then they will look at the 3 different public objectives. Each player will score based on those and then choose one of their 2 private objectives to score. If they have any wild tokens at the end of the game, those are each going to be worth 1 point, and whoever has the most points wins the game of Rolling Heights. So there you have it. That is Rolling Heights from John D. Clair and AEG. And if you like that push your luck element mixed with that little Sim City vibe, definitely check this one out. The Kickstarter link is going to be down in the description below. This is set to launch on February 8th. But again, some of these things are in prototype form, so I know the dark blue meeple and the black meeple do look similar on the table, so they're going to be changing one of those colors to make it easier to distinguish, along with some of the lettering on the boards and some of the tiles are going to be made a little bit more clear, a little larger to be able to see from different sides of the table. But all in all, that is Rolling Heights. I want to thank you guys for stopping through, checking this one out with me, and hopefully I'll see you guys on the next one.